4-4, this is 7, stand by a minute. Just come on, what is your attack angle?
Okay, talk to him, see what that did. Charlie Horse, 88.
24, traffic 275.
85 just made a pass in there. Can you give us any?
Go 21, 77.
Roger, sir. Be advised we have Jolly Green 21 and 66 standing by over.
Okay, I'll put it a little closer than those trees. Let me come around with a loud 3 and I'll put it on those trees there.
Roger that, loud 3.
Let's talk about, as we were at breakfast this morning, you were talking about an incident that happened in training, I believe, where you had to eject at a very low altitude, and everybody was surprised you had survived. Can you lead me through that? Because it kind of fits in with, you know, when you go into the military, anything can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, it's anywhere in life. But,
yeah, and particularly when you're a pilot, things happen and they happen fast. So the A1 propeller was 13 and a half feet in diameter. And if you ever had a little toy gyroscope when you were a kid and you pulled the string out and spun it up, you could push on the side of that gyroscope while it was spinning and push it over and take your finger up and it'd come right back up. That gyroscopic effect from the torque of the engine in the A1 was so strong that it wanted to rotate the airplane around the propeller to the left, which was the direction the propeller was spinning. So when you took off, or any time you went from low power to high power quickly, the airplane wanted to go to the left. So on takeoff, it was full right rudder and some right aileron to keep you going straight down the runway because of the torque. Well, one of the things we did in training, and you're always going to be a better pilot if when you do something in training, you register it and remember it. We would go up to 5,000 feet off the ground, put the landing gear down, put the flaps down, slow the airplane down to a landing speed like below 120 knots. So you're just kind of floating along. And you would take the throttle and just pop it forward. The airplane would start to torque roll. You'd go full right rudder, full right aileron, and you would always stop the airplane right here. You couldn't stop it here. You definitely couldn't stop it here, and you could never stop it when it first started to roll. So you learned this is what the end of a torque roll looks like. So night bombing mission, there are 70 missions in the training syllabus. This is my 5th one to go. I'm finished after this one and 4 more. Night bombing on the Eglin ranges, flight of 4, IP single seat airplane leading, solo South Vietnamese student number 2, solo Randy Jayne American student number 3, and number 4 is a Vietnamese student who's really having trouble in a 2-seater with an Air Force instructor pilot in his right seat. So the flight lead briefs me, be particularly careful on takeoff that you watch number 2 in front of you and be sure that he's doing a correct rejoin on me. We don't want to have him run into me in the dark. And I said, fine. So light airplane, you know, not big bombs, little bitty 25-pound practice bombs. And I do normal takeoff roll, come off the ground, reach down, and just as I reach to raise the gear handle, so I'm 75 feet in the air, climbing positively, and I'm watching the lights. It's just dark, the lights of the guy in front of me. And just as I reach for the gear handle, the sound of the engine changes significantly, and I haven't touched anything, and the airplane starts to torque roll. And I mean, it started pretty quickly, and I went full right rudder, full right stick, and pulled the ejection handle in just this length of time I just said that to you.
And your altitude was what off the ground?
75 feet.
And you were using the Yankee
Yeah,
extraction
and I'm
system,
now.
which is not an ejection, it's
No,
rockets.
it's a rocket pulls you out. I'm at 75 feet off the ground at 55 degrees of bank, so I go out like this. The way the Yankee works is the rocket pulls you by your shoulders. The chute is blown out of the pack underneath you with a little powder charge like a firecracker and opens because it's blown open. So you immediately, and then the rocket disconnects from you and you reverse direction and you float down. Well, except when you're at 75 feet, there's no room to float down. So torque roll, full right rudder, full right aileron, boom, ejection. I feel myself go out. I reach for the parachute risers, and as I do, I hit the ground. And I hit on my feet. You know, your feet won't hold you up very much when you're going 150 miles an hour. So I hit my butt, and that broke my back, compression fracture. And then I bounced because I'm going laterally across the ground. And I hit on an asphalt cross taxiway, bounced, went 35 feet through the air, did a perfect judo roll, and hit the ground again flat. And I'm lying there and my body's in shock because I hit the ground so hard. But I'm completely conscious. And the first thing I realized is one of my two Coke fittings where you hook the parachute had physically broken. And as far as I know, it was the only time in an ejection that a Coke fitting ever failed, anybody. And they were in F4s and, you know, a million different airplanes. Anyway, and I'm lying on the ground, and I raised my two legs up. I said, okay, those, but I really hurt. But I said, my feet are working, my arms are working, and I feel wet. And I put my hand up like this, and we didn't wear oxygen masks at Hurlburt. We wore them in Vietnam, but we just had the little boom mic, so my face is open. But I realize I go like this, and it's blood. And I'm soaking wet with blood all over my chest, and I'm thinking, I don't think I'm bleeding to death. I don't feel anything like that, but that's blood. So meanwhile, the fire truck runs over the parachute. He comes so close to me. So he missed me.
He didn't see you.
He didn't see me, and he saw the parachute, and he slams on his brakes and skids across the parachute. So he's the length of the parachute risers away from me.
So you survived a crash and an extraction.
Yeah. And so a young airman who was on the ramp had seen me and came running over. And I said, hey, come help me. And the guy looked at me and turned around and went the other way. Well, I thought it was because he was scared. He actually did the right thing. He thought, I know where he is. I need to tell the fire department. And now the fire department was going to the crashed airplane, so they weren't paying any attention to me. But he then tells somebody where the ambulance is to come get me. So they put me in one of the old field ambulances, cracker box ambulances, looks like MASH, put me on a litter and strapped me down, and I say to the corpsman, am I bleeding to death? And he says, no, sir. He says, your chin's ripped open. You can still see the scar. Your chin's ripped open. And I said, well, that's from my chin strap when I hit the ground going like that. And he said, no, you're fine. It's just, you know, your facial bleeding is like a boxer. You know, you can be covered with blood and you're really not hurt. And that's all that was. But I'm really having trouble moving. So we're start for Eglin. So it's like 12 miles from Hurlburt around through Fort Walton Beach to Eglin. It's Christmas season. He's going up the highway. There's a big shopping center. The light is red. He's got his sirens and his lights on. And this lady with the family full of station wagon goes through the green light and doesn't see the ambulance, and he hits her broadside. So I'm lying there strapped in the ambulance with the corpsman leaning over me, and the next thing I know is this crash, and the corpsman disappears because he's not, I'm strapped down. He flies into the, kind of like the chain link fence between the the cab of the ambulance in the back and hits that pretty hard, and he got banged up, but nothing serious. And so they're all back checking on me, and it didn't hurt anybody in the car, which was amazing. It was one of those 70s, the size of a small destroyer station wagon full of kids, but it fortunately didn't hurt any of them. And so now the civilian ambulance comes and takes me and the corpsman to the hospital. And when I get to the hospital, I realize that we've been beaten by another ambulance from downtown that had an airman that got called back in the emergency because my airplane landed on another one and blew it up, and there's all sorts of fire and all. And he'd had a motorcycle accident, and he was hurt pretty bad, so he's in the emergency room, and I'm in the emergency room.
Now, during all this, when your airplane hit the other plane, didn't you mention some rockets going off?
Well, Ron Smith said that, but he didn't remember the story. What actually happened was the plane hit, and the engine, and if you think about the physics of weight, that engine's the heaviest thing on that airplane, and it's bolted on the front. When that airplane hit the ground, that engine came off. Well, it's a radial engine, so it's round, so it's like a giant wheel from a... And it goes rolling, the engine goes rolling across the ramp, across the grass, into the parking lot, and up the back of my best friend's Plymouth Barracuda, and totals it. Well, it didn't total it, but damaged it pretty bad. And the other thing that happened was the A-37, they used to sit alert for the drug runners, in the Gulf of Mexico. It had machine guns on it. I had live 20-millimeter cannon rounds. Now, fortunately, they were training rounds, so that it was just a bullet. It wasn't an explosive cannon round. These things are cooking off, and so these rounds are going off the two airplanes, and the fire guys, and of course they're trained to deal with that. But that was all going on unbeknownst to me because I was on the way to the hospital. But the story gets better. I'm in the hospital. Nancy comes to see me. They say, you've got a broken back, but it's a clean compression fracture, and it's going to be sore for a while. But we don't think you did any spinal damage other than you're now shorter than you used to be. But I had these terrible bone bruises all along my right side, and I could tell that was going to take forever. Well, I'm confronted with two orthopedic specialists at the Eglin Hospital, one major and one young captain. And looking at this major, it took me about 10 seconds to conclude, I don't like this guy. I'm not going to like this guy at all, and he's not going to take good care of me. So that's what Randy's brain is saying. This guy says, we need to put you in a body cast immediately. And the other doctor's over there, young guy's, kind of rolling his eyes. And I said, I don't need a body cast. You just need to put me in a brace. And he says, no, you need a body cast. So they put me in a body cast. Then they start giving me morphine. Well, that's when I learned how people become drug addicts, because that stuff, I was so sore, I was in agony, and the minute that needle went into your arm, the pain just went away. So it was really hard on the third day when they came and said, okay, now you're going to get half a dose, then you're going to get a quarter of a dose, then you're going to get an eighth of a dose, then you're not going to get any. And throughout all that, you're just in agony because it hurts just like it did if they hadn't given you anything. But anyway, I worked through that. So on the fourth day in the hospital, and I've got this stupid body cast from here to here, General Leroy Manor, who was famous because he was the special ops commander at Hurlburt, and he was the guy that did the famous Sante POW camp raid. General Manor walks into the room. He doesn't know me from Adam. I don't know him. He said, hey, Captain Jayne, I just wanted to check on you, see how you're doing. I said, I'm fine. I said, thank you for doing that, sir. And he said, I want to make you an offer. I realize this has been a very traumatic event, and if you would like me to get you a change of assignment, I can make that happen instantly. And I said, sir, growing up in Missouri, when that horse threw you, the rule was you got back on that horse. I said, I'm going to go back and finish my 5 flights and go to the war in the A1. And he said, I'm glad you said that. That's great. And as he starts to leave, he said, is there anything else I can do for you? And I said, well, it's very sweet of you to ask. I said, my wife's in good shape. She's down here with our daughter, and her mother's here. So, she's got support. The mother-in-law came to visit. I said, but sir, there is one thing you could do for me. I've got these 2 orthopedic doctors, one major and one captain, and I'm really not comfortable with the major, but he claims to be in charge. I'd really rather have the captain as my doctor and have him be the one that defines my treatment. And General Manor looks at me and says, well, that's easy, I'll do that, and walks out the door. About an hour later, the captain orthopedic doctor walks in, he says, what did you do? And I said, I just asked General Manor if I could have you be my doctor. And he said, I'm now your doctor. And he said, the cast's coming off tomorrow. So that was the, and so I went back to Missouri on medical leave. Dear friend was the athletic director of the university, gave me full access to their, locker room, health room, fitness, weight room, all that stuff, full body whirlpool. And they're friends of mine in Kirksville, Missouri that remember this, of watching me drag my right leg around the indoor track where I could hardly walk. From that to walking around the track and not limping, to then jogging around the track, to then running around the track. And that was between December 10th, 1970, and March 12th, 1971, I went back to Hurlburt. The doctor, the captain flight surgeon says, he gave me a little bitty brace that weighed less than a pound, that just was here and here, kept you from bending over and went around your back. And the rule was, you don't have to wear it to bed, take it off to take a shower, but promise me you'll wear it all other times, including when you're working out. And I said, well, what can I not do working out? And he said, you can do anything working out as long as the pain's not too severe. And I said, well, that's the kind of doctor I like. So I basically would get in the whirlpool, and that would take the pain out of all the bone bruises, and then I'd work the joints and the muscles, and I was in good shape. So I go back to him. He says, take the brace off. I'm in his office. I take it off. He says, touch your toes. Remember, it's my lower back that's broken. So I get to about 18 inches above my toes, and it doesn't hurt. I'm just stiff. I just can't. And he says, lie down on the floor and pull your knees up, raise your legs up, loosen your back. You'll do it. I did this for about 5 minutes and went down and touched my toes. And he took the Air Force Form 1042, which is the medical, flying, grounding or flying, signed me back on flying duty, and I went back to the squadron, and they said, we're probably going to give you 5 rides to get you back even, and then we'll give you your last 5 rides. And I said, fine. After the second of those 5 rides, they said, if you're comfortable, we're just going to give you the last 5. I said, I'm comfortable. So I did 7 flights and was on the next airplane to go to Thailand. So that's that story.
That's amazing.
But when people say, and then the accident report and the Yankee extraction system people said, Randy, you were out of the defined safe envelope. I was too low, too much angle of bank, to survive. But I did because everything worked the way it was supposed to. But people said, we don't understand how you get out of the airplane that fast. I said, when you went up and did those torque rolls and realized that the minute that wing started down and you put in full controls, it was still going to go here. The minute that wing started down in the dark, I knew what the end of the movie was going to look like. And so I immediately pulled the handle. And so they figured that had I waited 1 more second, I would have just shot myself into the ground.
Yep.
But you didn't need to wait 1 more second if your brain said, you need to do this right now.
Yep. Let's practice.
Yeah.
And that it's preparation.
Yeah. But had that training, that torque roll training, not been part of the syllabus, I wouldn't have lived through it. I wouldn't be here because I did it. We probably did it 4 times, maybe 5 times, and you thought, okay, I've tried to stop this airplane. It's at 135 degrees of bank, not completely upside down, but almost, and that's the end of this movie.
Yep. That is fantastic.
One. Fast movers in the night means search and rescue at first light. Hey, beeper, come up, voice. Now get your young ass on that horse. We took big air bursts on this star. This could be my silver star. We bring Charlie Grease by all means. Stands with a load. I see an F4 taking off, and I start to think, why don't they move it